Flight attendant rips up black girl's ticket, not knowing her father owns the entire airline. The airport buzzed with the kind of tension that always seems to settle over travelers in a hurry. In the midst of that busy concourse, a young girl named Imara stood near the gate, her eyes shining with anticipation. She was traveling alone for the first time, heading home after a few days at a leadership conference for teens. The husher around her was broken by the squeak of rolling luggage, the beep of intercom announcements, and occasional snippets of conversation from strangers. Amara wore a neatly pressed button-down shirt and jeans. She clutched a ticket and a passport, her heart pounding from excitement mixed with a tinge of anxiety. She knew her father's position in the world was significant, but she had grown up hearing him say that each person was more than their material success and that humility cost nothing. Despite that, a wave of nervousness passed through her whenever she was in a public space where no one recognized who she was or who her father happened to be. Still, she tried to remember her father's words, reminding herself that good character and kindness were the most important things to carry. She approached the gate counter and greeted the flight attendant with a polite smile. The attendant, whose name tag read, Gloria, barely acknowledged Imara. Her lips pulled into a taut line as she scanned the ticket. Gloria's eyes briefly flickered over Amara's face, and her braids then landed on Amara's name. "Are you traveling alone?" Gloria asked, her tone sharp. "Yes, ma'am," Imara said quietly. "I'm going back home to see my family." Gloria's gaze moved up and down a silent judgment. Yara had encountered subtle stares before, but usually she brushed them off. There was no reason to suspect that anything out of the ordinary would happen. She handed over her passport, waiting for the usual routine of checking seats and confirming identity. Gloria gave a quick nod and returned the passport. Then she studied the ticket again, as though it might have been tampered with. Amara sensed a shift in the flight attendant posture. Something rigid and defensive. It reminded her of teachers who doubted her capabilities when she was younger, the type who would scrutinize her homework more closely than others. A trickle of unease ran through her, but she had no intention of causing a scene. Gloria pursed her lips. "This ticket doesn't look valid." Amara frowned, glancing at the slip of paper in the attendant's hand. "It's definitely valid. I confirmed everything when I left the conference this morning. It doesn't look valid to me." Gloria repeated, voice growing louder. Several heads turned in their direction. Travelers curious about the commotion, Amara felt the swell of embarrassment. She wanted to handle the situation politely, mindful that losing her temper would do no good. "That's the ticket that was booked for me by my father's office," she said, speaking as calmly as she could. Gloria waved off the explain and stared pointedly at Imara. "Sure it was. Don't try to pull a fast one. I've seen plenty of passengers like you trying to get on flights they're not entitled to." Amara felt a flash of anger. That final phrase stung. "Passengers like you." She wondered what that meant. The uneasy suspicion she had about the woman's attitude began to solidify. Her father had warned her about moments like this, people who'd make quick judgments before knowing anything. Still, she tried to keep her tone steady. "I promise this is a legitimate ticket," she insisted. "Maybe you can scan it again instead of rechecking the computer." Gloria scoffed and gave a dismissive roll of her eyes. A tense pause followed, during which Imara could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Gloria's face hardened and, in a sudden motion that shocked everyone around, she ripped the ticket in two. The sound of tearing paper cut through the normal airport chatter. Amara's eyes went wide. "What are you doing? That's my ticket." Gloria ignored her protest. "Move along, little girl. I'm not letting you board with a fraudulent ticket. Go find another flight if you can pay for it." A few onlookers stared, some whispered to one another, while a couple of them took a step forward as though they wanted to intervene. Amara felt her cheeks burn, not just with embarrassment, but with a pulsing anger that almost made her forget the values her father had taught her. She clutched the halves of the torn ticket, words stuck in her throat. She could call her father and have him fix this immediately, but she hated drawing attention in that way. She always wanted to stand on her own feet. Still, this was beyond anything she'd experienced before she had the right to stand up for herself. But as she opened her mouth to speak, Gloria had already turned to the next passenger in line. Ignoring her completely, Amara moved away from the counter, her mind swirling with confusion. humiliation, and a rising sense of righteous anger. She was determined not to cry. Taking a deep breath, she flipped open her phone and dialed her father if anyone could help. It was him, but she didn't want to open with a complaint. Instead, she took a moment to calm her voice. He picked up on the second ring. "Imara, is everything all right? You should be boarding soon." She could hear the concern in his voice. "Dad, there's a problem. They won't let me." "Board," the flight attendant said. "My ticket was fraudulent, and she tore it." Silence greeted her on the other end. Then her father cleared his throat, his voice measured but with a tense undercurrent. "Let me handle this. Where exactly are you standing now?" Amara told him her location. He told her to wait and assured her everything would be resolved. She ended the call still shaking from the incident. She glanced around at the other passengers. Some stared at her with pity, others with curiosity, and a few looked away awkwardly as though they couldn't deal with the situation. Amara wished she could disappear. She didn't want to cause a scene, didn't want to fight, but she also knew she was not in the wrong. Meanwhile, across the country, her father, Jonathan Coates, sat in an office that most people never imagined existed. He was a silent power behind one of the largest airlines in the world, an empire built from a small charter service decades ago. Over the years, he had consolidated partnership, expanded routes, and ensured the brand's reputation remained polished and modern. He also took pride in treating his employees well. There were countless stories of how he had personally intervened to help staff members in times of crisis, ensuring they were taken care of. To Jonathan, success meant little without compassion and fairness. Upon hearing his daughter's distressed voice, Jonathan felt the surge of protective anger he seldom experienced. He seldom flaunted his position. He believed in letting his work speak for itself. But this incident crossed all lines of decency, especially because he knew exactly what it looked like. When prejudice reared its head, he rose from behind his desk, made a short phone call to his executive assistant, and left instructions for immediate action. Then he walked out, ignoring the stares from his staff. Usually he moved calmly through the corridors of corporate offices that day. His stride was purposeful, his jaw set within minutes. He was in a black company car heading straight to the airport to meet his daughter. Amara didn't quite know the specifics of what her father was doing, but she had confidence in him. She decided to stand quietly to the side of the gate, refusing to be chased away. She had every right to be here. She watched Gloria help other passengers with a forced politeness, but whenever Gloria glanced in Amara's direction, Amara saw the same disapproval glinting in her eyes. Amara wondered how such a person got a job as a flight attendant. In theory, flight attendants were supposed to help and guide people, not tear up tickets and humiliate them in public. As Amara waited, she remembered a conversation she'd once had with her father. He had mentioned how he wanted to keep a low profile so that she and her siblings would understand the value of hard work and humility. He had said that everyone deserved respect, from the wealthiest to the most ordinary in this world. "You'll meet people who can't see past their own bias," he had warned. "Handle them with poise. Know your worth, and if it comes down to it, I'll always have your back." She felt a cautious sense of relief, knowing her father was on his way. She clutched the torn pieces of her ticket, half tempted to approach Gloria again, but the humiliating memory of the public scene made her hold back. Instead, she took a seat near the window, gazing out at the planes that taxied by. She let her mind wander to the friends she had made at the conference. They had shared stories about wanting to become astronauts, entrepreneurs, humanitarian activists. One friend had admitted that he wanted to be the first in his family to finish college. Their enthusiasm had made Amara see her own future more clearly. She wanted to make a difference, perhaps by following in her father's footsteps, but with her own twist. She wasn't sure which path she'd choose. But she knew that moments like this, where she had to stand up against unfairness, would shape her character. Time ticked by, and soon enough she felt her phone was Jonathan had texted her. "I'm here, meet me in front of the information kiosk." Himra stood, nerves still fluttering. She caught Gloria's narrowed gaze once more, but she refused to avert her eyes instead. She offered a polite nod, which Gloria did not return. Imara made her way through the busy terminal, weaving past frantic travelers' families with strollers and backpackers. She found her father standing near a digital display board that listed departures and arrivals. He wore a crisp suit, nothing ostentatious but enough to signal that he was no ordinary passenger. As soon as she saw him, she fought back tears. He pulled her into a hug and she felt the tension in her chest begin to ease. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," Jonathan said softly. She swallowed hard. "Dad, she ripped my ticket in half right there at the gate. She practically called me a fraud." He nodded his expression. "Grim, let's address it. Stay by my side." They walked together toward the gate area. Several staff members recognized Jonathan. Their eyes went wide and they hurried to greet him, confusion and a bit of fear. Mingling in their faces, he calmly asked who the supervisor on duty was. Someone pointed toward an older man in a dark blazer, standing near the gate check-in counters. Jonathan led Imara in that direction. Ignoring the stares of passing travelers, the supervisor named Richard seemed startled when he saw Jonathan approach Mr. Coates. He said, clearing his throat, "Is there something I can help you with?" Jonathan's tone was polite but firm. "Yes, Richard. My daughter's ticket was destroyed by a member of your staff." I'd like to know why. Shock flashed across Richard's face. His gaze flickered to Amara, and he noticed the torn halves of the ticket in her hand. He turned pale, destroyed by that's highly unprofessional. Who was it? Before Imara could speak, Gloria stepped forward. She tried to maintain a confident posture, but her voice wavered slightly. "I found the ticket suspicious, sir. I have to protect the integrity of our flights." She was Jonathan, still calm, raised a hand. "You tore a valid ticket, even if you doubted its legitimacy. There's a process. You don't humiliate a passenger and destroy their property. Do you realize what you've done?" Gloria seemed to struggle with her response. She glanced at Amara but refused to meet her eyes. I did what I thought was right. I've seen a lot of counterfeits." Richard stepped in, trying to diffuse the tension. "Mr. Coates, let's go to a quieter area to sort this out. We don't want a public scene." Amara thought about objecting, but she saw her father's slight nod. He recognized the importance of keeping things civil. They followed Richard down a short corridor and to a staffing area behind the check-in desk, where a few chairs and a desk stood. Gloria trailed behind them, her expression shifting between defiance and apprehension. Jonathan motioned for Imara to sit, then turned to Richard. "I'm not here to cause unnecessary trouble, but this incident must be addressed. My daughter was treated unfairly, and for your information, I paid for her ticket in full through legitimate channels. There is no excuse used for an employee to act like this." Richard nodded, wringing his hands. "I agree, sir. This is unacceptable. I sincerely apologize on behalf of the airline." Gloria opened her mouth as if to protest, but no words came out. Amara watched her, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. She knew this moment was a chance to teach a lesson, or perhaps to find some accountability. Jonathan continued, his voice low. "We pride ourselves on treating all passengers with respect, no matter who they are. If an employee is showing bias, that's not just a personal failing, it undermines our company's core values." Richard cleared his throat. "Of course, sir. We'll take immediate disciplinary action, miss." He turned to Imara, looking truly apologetic. "I am so sorry. We will make this right." Amara nodded, swallowing the nod in her throat. "Thank you. I don't like causing trouble. I just want to get home." Jonathan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He turned to Gloria and spoke with carefully measured words. "Is there anything you'd like to say to my daughter?" Gloria's face was tense, but a flicker of guilt crossed her features. She exhaled shakily. I'm sorry if I offended you." Imara didn't say anything for a moment, letting the apology sink in. But something about Gloria's tone felt more forced than genuine. Imara glanced at her father, who gave a subtle nod, encouraging her to speak. "I accept your apology," she said softly. "But I hope you understand the seriousness of what you did. It's not just about a ticket, it's about how you treated me." Gloria pressed her lips together, her knuckles tight around the edge of the desk. She didn't respond. It was clear she didn't fully grasp the depth of her wrongdoing, or maybe refused to admit it. Amara felt a pang of disappointment. She had always tried to believe that people could change if they were shown the right path. Jonathan concluded the meeting quickly. After that, he turned to Richard. "I trust you'll handle the details for now. I want to make sure my daughter can board her flight. Richard hurriedly issued a replacement ticket this time, making sure Amara had a seat in first class. He apologized repeatedly, promising to follow up Jonathan, thanked him curtly without another glance at Gloria. He led Amara out of the office and back into the terminal before going to the gate. Jonathan took Amaris aside. His expression softened. "Are you all right? That was quite an ordeal." Amara managed a small smile. "I'm okay. I guess this is just what you warned me about." Jonathan sighed. "It doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it easy to deal with." They made their way to a lounge area where they could talk. Privately, Amara settled into a comfortable seat. Her father sitting across from her, she noticed a few airport employees peering at Jonathan from a distance, no doubt recognizing him. She felt a swirl of pride and relief tempered by the lingering sting of being humiliated. Her father leaned forward, folding his hands. "Your flight leaves soon, and I could ride with you. If you'd like, I have a meeting back home anyway." Amara appreciated the offer. The idea of flying with her father by her side gave her a sense of comfort after what had just happened. She agreed, and within minutes, Jonathan had arranged for his own ticket. They passed through the gate together. Gloria was nowhere to be seen. Richard was there, forcing a polite smile and wishing them a pleasant flight. Yar noticed how other gate agents suddenly appeared extra helpful, directing them toward the jet bridge once on the plane. Amara and her father took their seats in the plush first-class cabin. Amara looked around at the spacious seats, feeling a twinge of awkwardness. She usually traveled economy by choice, wanting to experience the world without all the thrills that her father's status could afford. But this time she decided to accept the convenience she wanted, space to clear her head as the plane began to fill. Amara watched the steady stream of passengers searching for overhead bin, space struggling with seat assignments, and corralling children. She sensed a shift in the cabin's atmosphere. People noticed Jonathan's presence. Some recognized him from business magazines or interviews. She felt the dissonance of anonymity and fame colliding just an hour earlier. She had been treated like a second-class citizen. Now, because of her father, she was receiving subtle nods of difference. It was a jarring reminder of how differently the world treated people based on perceived status. They buckled in, and soon the plane taxied onto the runway as it roared into the sky. Amara leaned back against the seat, tension drifting away. She glanced at her father, who offered a reassuring smile. "Get some rest," he suggested. "It's been a long day." She tried to sleep, but her mind raced with thoughts. She wondered if Gloria would face serious consequences, or if the apology and disciplinary talk would just fade into a quiet shuffle of airline bureaucracy. A part of her felt relief that justice had been served in some way, but another part of her knew that not everyone got to call their father to fix a situation. Some people faced discrimination daily with no one to back them up. She drifted off into a light doze, but images kept surfacing. Gloria's cold stare, the ripping of the ticket, the traveler's gawking expressions. By the time the plane landed, she felt more tired than when she'd first boarded. Jonathan gently touched her shoulder to wake her. They disembarked, stepping into a new airport home. The place smelled familiar, full of memories of her father picking her up from previous trips. She felt her spirits lift a little, stepping out into the arrivals area. They spotted a uniformed driver waiting for them. Jonathan's phone buzzed nonstop with calls and messages, but he ignored them. He wanted to focus on Amara in the car as they drove away from the airport. Amara stared out the window at the city. She caught sight of distant skyscrapers, billboards, and people hustling along the sidewalks. She found herself thinking about the next step. Should she just let this incident pass? Or was there a way to turn this negative experience into something constructive? Jonathan seemed to read her thoughts. "I plan to make sure the airline reviews its policy," he said softly. "No one should be humiliated like that." Amara nodded slowly. "I understand, but maybe there's more we can do." He gave her a curious look. "What do you mean?" She took a breath, her mind buzzing with the echoes of her time at the leadership conference. "I met some amazing people there who are working on diversity training programs for businesses, nonprofits, schools. What if we encourage something like that for the airline? Something comprehensive that goes beyond just telling employees not to discriminate." A thoughtful expression crept over Jonathan's features. "That's not a bad idea." It could be beneficial not only in preventing situations like yours, but also in fostering a stronger, more unified company culture. Amara felt a spark of excitement. I can reach out to some of the contacts I made. I'm sure they'd be eager to help. Jonathan smiled, genuine pride in his eyes. I'd like that. Let's discuss it more once we get home for now. Let's rest, and we'll take action in the morning. They continued along the highway, the city lights flickering by in a bright mosaic. Amara let out a long breath, feeling a mixture of relief and renewed determination. She knew the journey ahead might not be simple. People like Gloria existed in every sector of society, but Amara believed that one could push for change, even if it started with small steps when they arrived at their family home, a modest yet elegant residence that Jonathan had chosen for its warmth and comfort. Amara felt the tension fully melt away. Familiar staff greeted them with friendly smiles. Amara's mother, Angela, hurried to the foyer, her eyes lighting up as she saw Amara. They embraced warmly. Angela stepped back, concern creasing her brow. I heard what happened. Are you all right? She looked at Jonathan questioningly. Amara managed a reassuring nod. I'm fine, Mom. It was scary and humiliating. But Dad helped. Angela frowned, brushing Amara's braids away from her face. I can't believe someone would act like that. I'm just glad you're home safe. Jonathan wrapped an arm around both of them, drawing them close. We'll talk more in the morning tonight. Let's have a quiet dinner, get some rest, and then figure out the best way forward. Amara agreed. She headed to her room, the comforting sense of home wrapping around her. She set her suitcase in the corner, falling onto her bed with a sense of relief. Her mind churned with lingering questions. Why had Gloria been so quick to judge her? Would the airline truly enforce consequences? And how many other passengers had gone through something similar without recourse? Despite the ache in her heart, exhaustion soon claimed her. She slept fitfully, dreaming of airport gates and rippling tickets, but also glimpsing a future where she could help change the environment that allowed such behavior to thrive in the morning. She woke to soft sunlight streaming through her windows. She showered, dressed casually, and headed downstairs. The smell of breakfast wafted through the hall. Her father was on the phone, pacing by the living room windows. Her mother flipped pancakes in the kitchen, humming quietly. Amara stepped in to help her mother, measuring out some coffee grounds. Angela paused, giving Amara a concerned look. Any dreams? Amara nodded, forcing a small laugh. The usual replays of humiliating moments. But I feel better now. Angel Ang sighed sympathetically. You know we're here for you, and your father will handle the official side of things. But if you want to talk about anything, I'm here. Amara appreciated that offer. She looked up from the bowl of batter, hearing Jonathan end his phone call. He walked into the kitchen, setting his phone on the table, a serious expression on his face. I spoke with Richard again. He announced that it seems that flight attendant is getting suspended pending an investigation. They're also planning a meeting to discuss new training procedures. Amara felt a pang of satisfaction, but also sadness that this was all necessary. That's a start. Angela offered Jonathan a cup of coffee. I hope something long-term comes from this. A suspension alone might not shift her perspective. Jonathan nodded in agreement, sipping the coffee. Exactly one measure might not fix everything, but I think we can take this as an opportunity to make a broader impact. He gestured for Amara to join him at the dining table. Angela brought over a plate of pancakes and they settled in. Amara took a deep breath, feeling a spark of confidence. I'd like to invite some of my colleagues from the conference to discuss a program specifically for addressing bias and discrimination. We can pitch it to the airline's board. Angela and Jonathan exchanged approving looks. Jonathan responded, that's precisely what I had in mind. We can start by reaching out to the board members. We'll need a formal proposal. Amara felt a rush of excitement. I can get started today. I'll message my friends, see how quickly we can draft something. Angela cut a piece of pancake, smiling at Amara. I love seeing you like this, turning a negative experience into something positive. That's what leaders do. Amara returned the smile despite the unpleasantness of the previous day. She felt a renewed sense of purpose after breakfast. She retrieved her laptop and settled into the family study. She sent messages to two of her conference friends who had talked at length about diversity programs. She explained the situation and asked if they'd be willing to collaborate on a pilot project for the airline. Within minutes, she received enthusiastic replies. They arranged to chat via video conference that afternoon. Jonathan, meanwhile, made some calls to set up a preliminary meeting with the airline's board of directors. He had enough sway to schedule a conversation quickly, but he wanted to ensure that the proposal would be thorough. With actionable ideas, Yar's mother offered her insights from a nonprofit perspective, having volunteered extensively with community outreach programs. By midday, they had a framework for what they wanted to accomplish. When the call with her friends took place, Amara laid out the plan. She explained how the conference had inspired her to act. They discussed modules that would go beyond a generic sensitivity, training modules that would examine systemic biases, incorporate real-life stories, interactive sessions, and consistent follow-up. They wanted participants to reflect on their own behavior and assumptions in a guided way. Her friends offered additional ideas. Referencing research and existing models of successful training initiatives, Amara took notes rapidly, occasionally muting to share thoughts with her father, who sat nearby by the time they ended the call. She felt a sense of progress. This wasn't just about disciplining one flight attendant. It was about possibly creating a shift in corporate culture. She knew it was ambitious to think such a large company could change quickly, but she believed it was worth trying. Over the next few days, Jonathan and Amara worked closely to refine the proposal. They added thorough documentation statistics on how diversity training could improve employee satisfaction, reduce turnover, and enhance the airline reputation. They included personal anecdotes, though Amara opted to keep her name out of the official narrative of the incident, focusing instead on the broader issues. It was a delicate balance. She wanted to be an advocate without turning the entire spotlight on herself. Eventually, the day came when Jonathan and Amara would present their proposal to a subset of the board. Amara felt jitters in her stomach as they walked into a sleek conference room on an upper floor of the airline's headquarters. A half-dozen board members were present, along with a few senior executives. They all rose in respect when Jonathan entered, but he quickly directed attention to Amara, explaining that she was leading the initiative. Amara took a seat at the head of the table. Her father beside her, she spoke clearly and confidently, outlining the main points of their plan. She explained the real-life consequences of discrimination and how it not only hurt passengers, but also damaged the brand. She highlighted how a forward-thinking, values-driven training program could set the airline apart, making it a beacon of excellence and inclusion. Some board members nodded enthusiastically. Others looked skeptical, flipping through the proposal documents. One board member, an older woman named Cynthia, asked pointed questions about cost and feasibility. Amara listened carefully and answered each concern, referencing the research they had compiled. Jonathan chimed in to add financial perspectives, emphasizing that cost was an investment in the airline's reputation and potential to attract new customers. The meeting lasted for over an hour. When it ended, Cynthia offered a measured smile. "This is ambitious, but I see the merit. Well, definitely discuss it further at the full board meeting." Jonathan shook hands with the executives, thanking them for their time. Amara felt a swirl of relief. It wasn't a final victory, but it was a good first step. Her father turned to her as they left the building. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice laced with genuine warmth. "No matter what the board decides, you made a strong case for change." She smiled, exhaling tension. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done this without your support." He patted her shoulder. This is just the beginning. In the days that followed, the airline's internal investigation continued. Richard contacted Jonathan regularly with updates. Gloria had been placed on unpaid leave, while the company reviewed passenger statements, video footage, and any prior complaints. It turned out that Amara was not the first person to raise concerns about her behavior. Jonathan was careful to stay neutral, allowing the investigation to run its course. He wanted due process, though a part of him longed to ensure that Gloria never treated another passenger that way again. As for Amara, her life returned to a sense of normalcy. On the surface, she attended classes, hung out with friends, and worked on extracurricular activities. Yet she felt a shift inside her, a spark of resolve that had been ignited by that humiliating moment. She knew that once the airline board made its decision, she would be right there ready to see the initiative through one afternoon. She was at home studying the sunlight streaming through the window when she heard her father call her name from downstairs. She set aside her textbooks and hurried to find him standing by the front door. Phone in hand, he gestured for her to come closer. "It's Richard," he said quietly. "He wants to speak with you." Amara felt her heartbeat quicken. She took the phone, greeting Richard politely. He sounded relieved. I wanted you to know that after a thorough review, the airline decided to terminate Gloria's employment. There was clear evidence of multiple discriminatory incidents. Amara was silent for a few seconds, processing the news. She didn't feel joy, nor did she feel pity. Instead, she felt a sense of justice and inevitability. She thanked Richard for letting her know. He continued, we have also taken your presentation to the board. There's a lot of enthusiasm for implementing a new training program. The final vote will be next week, but it looks promising. Amara felt a hint of excitement flutter in her chest. That's good to hear. I hope it makes a real difference. Richard's tone grew earnest. I believe it can. It's unfortunate that an incident like yours had to happen for us to take action, but I'm thankful you're pushing for lasting change. They ended the call. Amara handed the phone back to her father, who looked at her questioningly. She relayed the news about Gloria and the board's upcoming vote. Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder. How do you feel? She let out a slow breath. It's bittersweet. I don't want anyone to lose their job. But what she did was wrong, at least now. The company seems serious about addressing the problem. He nodded. Understanding, your empathy is one of your best qualities, but remember, accountability is important too. You handled this with grace. She offered him a small smile. Let's see what happens next week. The day of the full board vote arrived more quickly than expected. Jonathan received an invitation for them to attend, so they could hear the final decision in person. Amara felt the same nervous energy as before. She dressed in a professional outfit and accompanied her father to the company's headquarters once again. This time the room was larger, packed with more board members and executives, all wearing sharp suits and exchanging polite greetings. The energy in the air was palpable, charged with expectation. Cynthia was there along with others whom Amara had seen only briefly at previous gatherings. A quiet hush fell as everyone took their seats. The meeting began with formalities including updates on the airline's quarterly performance, RU expansions, and financial reports. Amara shifted in her seat. Feeling a twinge of impatience, she understood that this was all part of corporate proceedings, but she couldn't help wanting them to get to the point. Finally, they reached the agenda item concerning the proposed diversity and bias training initiative. A senior board member introduced the topic, summarizing the backstory in vague terms. There was a recent incident involving unacceptable employee behavior. He said, carefully, not naming names. This led to a proposal spearheaded by Mr. Jonathan Coates and his daughter Amara to revamp our training. The materials have been circulated today. We'll vote on whether to implement the proposal across all divisions. He gestured toward Amara. She gave a brief nod, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. She hadn't expected to speak again, but he invited her to say a few words. She rose, heart pounding, and faced the room. Thank you for considering this proposal, she began. We believe this kind of training can not only prevent discrimination, but also foster a more inclusive, empathetic environment that benefits everyone, employees, passengers, and the overall reputation of the airline. She kept her remarks short and to the point. That then she sat down. A hush settled over the room. The senior board member cleared his throat. Let's proceed to the vote. Several board members raised their hands in favor. Amara's eyes scanned the room, her heart thumping. A handful of hesitations, but eventually nearly all hands went up. Only one or two seemed to linger, but they too voted in favor. The measure passed with overwhelming support. Amara felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. The senior board member offered a congratulatory smile. We will move forward with the development and rollout of this program as soon as possible, Mr. Coates. Amara, we'd like to coordinate with you on the next steps. They thanked him graciously, and after the formal meeting ended, a few executives approached Amara to shake her hand and express enthusiasm for the initiative. She felt a rush of validation. The humiliating incident at the airport had turned into a catalyst for meaningful change. She hoped it would set a precedent, not just for this airline, but maybe for others in the industry if the results were positive. Leaving the boardroom, Jonathan slipped an arm around her shoulders. Well done, he murmured. This is going to help a lot of people. She smiled up at him, grateful for his unwavering support. Thanks, Dad. I'm just glad we're making progress. They headed back to the car. Amara stared at the towering buildings around them, reflecting on how quickly life could change. One day she was just another passenger, quietly going about her business. The next, she'd become an inadvertent catalyst for a corporate transformation. She felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She also felt that this was just the first chapter in her journey. There was still a lot of work to be done. Over the subsequent weeks, Imara juggled her normal life responsibilities with her involvement in shaping the new training program. Her friends from the conference stepped in, offering their expertise. Airline executives set up committees to oversee the process, scheduling regular check-ins. Yara attended meeting via video calls. Sometimes after finishing her homework at night, her laptop propped on her desk. She was learning about corporate structures, adult responsibilities, and the complexities of rolling out a program that would affect thousands of employees worldwide. Meanwhile, Jonathan utilized his influence, tactfully ensuring that resources were allocated properly and that the executive team took the initiative seriously. He also stepped back at times to let Amara and her colleagues lead the creative and educational aspects. Amara appreciated that balance. It helped her gain confidence while still having a safety net. If she needed it throughout this period, media outlets caught wind of the airline's new program. Some journalists speculated about the reasons behind the initiative. The official statements remained vague about the specific incident. Yara preferred it that way. She didn't crave public attention or sympathy. She only wanted the program to stand on its own merits. Still, word leaked out on a few social media platforms that the impetus came from Jonathan Coates' daughter. People shared the story in fragments, praising the airline for taking steps to address racism. Though the details were often incomplete or sensationalized, Imara found herself receiving messages from strangers who claimed they too had faced discrimination from flight attendants or other service professionals. She responded politely, offering encouragement and directing them to the airline's newly reformed complaint channels. She recognized how widespread such issues were. It strengthened her resolve to see the training program through one evening after a long day of conference calls and planning sessions. Imara sat on the living room couch with her mother, flipping through channels. They paused on a local news segment that was discussing new corporate diversity initiatives across various industries. One of the examples cited was her father's airline. Amra listened intently, hearing the reporter briefly mention an incident that catalyzed the entire program. She felt a strange sense of pride and humility. Angela muted the TV. "You're doing good work," she said softly. Amara leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "It feels surreal sometimes, but it also feels right." The following week marked the official launch of the pilot program. The first modules were rolled out to a select group of employees, supervisors, HR managers, and some volunteer flight crew members who agreed to test the materials. Imara and her colleagues monitored the sessions through feedback forms and video recordings, making real-time adjustments as necessary. Some participants reacted positively, sharing that they had never examined their own biases so closely before. Others were skeptical, feeling it was unnecessary. But overall, the initial response seemed promising. As word spread internally, more employees signed up to participate voluntarily, even before it became mandatory. This wave of interest reassured Amara that they were on the right track. She, Jonathan, and the rest of their small team continued refining the content, preparing it for a company-wide rollout. About a month after the pilot began, the airline announced that all employees, regardless of role or seniority, would be required to complete the training that included top executives, ground staff pilots, and flight attendants. Amara took a moment to reflect on how much had changed since that day Gloria had ripped her ticket. She thought about how one moment of cruelty had opened a door to dialogue and action. That same week, Jonathan and Amara were invited to attend a gathering at an airport lounge, where employees who had completed the pilot training would share their experiences. Imara was nervous but also excited to meet the real faces behind the statistics she'd been monitoring. When they arrived, they found a room filled with employees from various backgrounds, all wearing name tags. Some recognized Imara and approached her with words of thanks or curious questions. A flight attendant named Maria confessed that she initially doubted the need for such training. "I always thought I treated everyone equally," Maria said. "But the sessions made me realize that sometimes our subconscious biases can influence how we interact with passengers. I caught myself being extra short-tempered with people who reminded me of a difficult passenger once had." Imara nodded, listening intently. "I'm glad the program helped you see that." Maria smiled. Yes, and now I'm more deliberate in how I treat people, especially if I sense I'm jumping to conclusions. Thank you for championing this. Another staff member, a security officer named Malik, said he appreciated the practical tips on de-escalation and empathy. I've seen a lot of tension at airports. People are stressed, worried about flights, luggage missing connections. It's easy for misunderstandings to escalate. This training gave me new tools, Amara felt her heart. War at these testimonials. At one point, the sound of laughter rippled through the room as employees swapped stories of awkward moments. It was a stark contrast to the hostility she had faced at the gate. She realized that for every Gloria, there were dozens of employees who genuinely wanted to do better toward the end of the gathering. Richard, the supervisor who had handled Amara's complaint, approached. He looked more relaxed than the first time. She'd met him. It's been quite a journey, he said with a smile. I never imagined we'd be here launching this company wide, but I'm glad we are. Amara returned his smile. Me too. He paused, then added, I hear you'll be attending college soon. Any idea what you want to major in? She shrugged lightly. I'm considering business, maybe with a minor in social impact or something related. I want to keep these efforts going, whether it's in my father's company or somewhere else. Richard nodded approvingly. The world could use more leaders like you. She blushed slightly at the compliment, thanking him. Glancing across the room, she spotted her father engaging in a lively discussion with a group of employees. He laughed wholeheartedly at some anecdote they shared. She felt a surge of affection and gratitude. He had always taught her to stand up for herself and for others when something was wrong. As the night wore on, the crowd began to thin. Jonathan and Amara prepared to head home. On their way out, a manager pulled Jonathan aside for a quick question, leaving Amara near the exit alone. She turned to observe the bustling terminal beyond the lounge's windows. Flights were arriving and departing, announcements echoing over the PA system. A sense of closure washed over her. Though the fight for equality and fair treatment was far from over, she had found a tangible way to contribute, sensing someone behind her. She turned. An older flight attendant was there, not part of the official gathering. She wore a neat uniform and a warm expression. I heard about what happened to you, the woman said quietly. I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry you went through that, and I'm grateful for what you're doing. Most of us do our best to welcome passengers. We hate to see someone tarnish our profession. Amara's eyes glistened. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for your work. I know the majority of flight attendants are dedicated and caring. The woman nodded and walked away, disappearing into the bustling corridor. Amara inhaled deeply, letting the moment sink in. Every step of this journey, from her ticket getting ripped up to spearheading a corporate initiative, had been a whirlwind of emotions, anger, humiliation, fear, hope, and now a cautious optimism. Jonathan finished his brief conversation and joined her, placing a comforting hand on her back. Ready to go home, she smiled. Yes, more than ready. They headed out together, father and daughter, stepping into the hum of the airport. The knowledge of what they had accomplished hung in the air around them like an invisible banner of hope. Not everyone's perspective would shift overnight, and not every passenger's experience would suddenly become perfect. But they had ignited a spark, and Amara believed that sparks, when nurtured, could become lasting flames. And as they walked, Amara held her head high, reminding herself of the lessons she'd learned in the most unexpected way. If one person could tear a ticket and rip away a traveler's dignity, then another person could mend what was broken and forge something stronger and better in its place. Did you enjoy this story of ambition, courage, and the power of one voice to spark change? Let us know in the comments what part resonated with you the most, or which character's journey surprised you. We love hearing your thoughts, and if you want more stories like this, full of twists, heart, and inspiration, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's plenty more where this came from, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey.